I can't see this as anything other than a threat to, obviously, I don't mean to be selfish, but I don't want my son and his peers drafted into this war. And that's something that you reported today on the Liberty Report, that as Iran escalates, Congress passes automatic involuntary draft registration. Now, this is the reason a lot of us voted against the Biden administration and the Kamala Harris campaign, because the Biden administration had floated doing this for Russia. How the F did we get here now? Can you tell us about this report?
It's dangerous, and the NDAA is notorious because it's a must-pass bill. They will slip some of the worst language in there. If you remember going back, 15 or 20 years, the things that they put in the NDAA. Well, this is a terrible thing because it will automatically register young men between the ages of 18 and 26 for the draft, for the selective service. And so what it does, it creates a database of these people, and there's no longer any question of being able to make decisions on whether you want to register or not, and whether a war is unpopular, whether a war is unconstitutional, which this war is very, very obviously unconstitutional. You're going to be forced now to be in a situation where you will be automatically registered for the draft. And a lot of people are salivating at the idea of starting a draft, of sharing the burden. The problem with this, as Dr. Paul says, is that presumption is that the government owns you, that owns your body, that you are a slave. And that just simply isn't the case. If we were attacked, which I don't think we have been, maybe the colonel is a better historian than me, since 1812 by foreigners on our own soil, unless you count 9/11, which is another story. I mean, it's not something that's going to happen, but if it does happen again, I'm thoroughly confident in our young men and women that they will defend their own country.
Right. This is not the existential threat to the United States, Colonel, right? As you've pointed out, it comes from Mexico, it comes across our southern border. It does not come from Iran, to say the least.
No, Dan's 100% on target, and I'm very confident that if you called for a draft on the assumption that the draft was for people to exclusively defend the United States here at home, you would have no difficulty. But we all know that's not what the draft is all about. But I think it's important to point something out. We don't have an army to send. Our army is too small. It's been cut back repeatedly. We have put our money into very exotic weapons, and particularly into this very large fleet, surface fleet, that has very limited utility in the modern world today. It's wonderful to watch jets take off and land, but naval power like that isn't going to win any wars. It's not even able to defend itself very effectively against the kinds of threats that we're seeing. So we don't have an army large enough. Secondly, the army, if we were to push it, and it would have to land somewhere. That means it has to come ashore in the Middle East. Wherever it comes ashore, whether it's on the coast of Syria, Israel, or perhaps Baluchistan in southern Iran, terrible place to do it, but if it happens, no one is going to be fooled in Tehran. Everyone will watch it on, real-time television from satellite-based reconnaissance. And very shortly, as soon as you've assembled most of your force, most of the ships are there disgorging equipment, you're going to be hit with precision-guided ballistic missiles and drones. We're not prepared to deal with that. We have not got an army right now that could cope with the kind of threat environment that you see in eastern Ukraine. And we're not going to have that for some time. So the whole idea of a ground war is preposterous.
Can you go back to Karg again, the island? We featured it yesterday on the show, and we did a bit of a deep dive on how strategically important that little island is off the coast of Iran. 90% of the oil flows through Iran from that island into those cargo shipping oil containers and so forth to flow out. There is talk, multiple Trump administration officials saying that they want to capture that island. Maybe you could just go a little deeper into what a crazy move that would be, and how in the world would the United States even plan to secure such an island?
Well, the first thing is that much of the oil and fuel that comes out of Karg Island goes to India and China and Japan and South Korea. So if you're really interested in harming those countries, by all means, destroy Karg Island. But taking it and holding it without getting into a major fight, in other words, you've got to move ground force somehow or another into the region. They have to cross the water. They have to get to the island to hold it. Well, good luck. I think that's going to be extremely dangerous and very difficult to do. But the important thing for everybody to remember is that if we do this, and it's probably not going to work, the island could easily be destroyed, And then Iran has no incentive of any kind to let oil infrastructure in the Persian Gulf survive anywhere. Refineries, drilling rigs, storage tanks, doesn't make any difference. All of those ports will be smashed. And I also think it's important to remember that the Israelis struck a desalination plant in Iran. And that's a very dangerous thing to do. Iran is not that dependent on those desalination plants, but the Gulf states and Saudi Arabia are extremely dependent on them. I hope the Iranians do not respond by destroying any of those plants, because that would end the Gulf states. You're talking about little places where large numbers of people, densely populated, are all dependent on water from those plants. That would cause mass death and certainly the destruction of the economy.
I want to ask you both how are we supposed to feel about this? Because if you've studied this conflict, you know that it is our government that started this on false pretenses. And then when you see these embarrassments militarily, it feels like we effed around and found out. It feels like just desserts. Our leaders deserve this, but our soldiers don't. And so how are we supposed to handle this? How do you guys view it? I'll start with you, Dan.
Well, what I'm worried about the most right now is something domestically. I mean, and I don't want to sound conspiratorial, but I'm worried about a false flag. I don't know if you've seen this, but the FBI apparently has been warning police departments in California that Iran may launch attack drones off the West Coast into the U.S. Now, to me at least, this is, as we see things falling apart, it becomes very obvious, regardless of what Hegseth tells us and what Trump tells us, it's very obvious that Iran has not been degraded. Next phase is false flags. Next phase is to get people on board with this. So I think this is something to definitely keep track of, because if something like this happens, you better say goodbye to any of our civil liberties, even our ability to go on the redacted. It'll be gone.
Yeah, Colonel. I mean, Dan's right, and I've been I fear false flags because you don't want to bring them up, you don't want to say it, but Israel loves false flags. They have a long history of it. Just look at the USS Liberty. I mean, look at the Lavon affair in Egypt, trying to drag us into a war. So it's one of Israel's favorite pastimes is false flag attacks. They're doing it right now in Azerbaijan. I wouldn't be surprised. Of course, they're reporting of attacks into Turkey, also trying to make it look like Iranian attacks. All of that. So Dan's right. On United States soil, is that something you're concerned about?
Well, first, let's be clear. Nobody is going to stop me from talking to Natali. I'm sorry, Clayton. Forget it. I will always show up to talk to Natali, even half dead. So
that's nice.
I don't really place too much credence in that, because my information tells me that the Iranian government has specifically instructed anyone that they're in contact with in the Western Hemisphere absolutely not to harm the United States. They understand that that would be a gift to Israel.
Wow.
And they're not interested in doing that. So I think your false flag analysis is sadly plausible and by no means impossible. It has to be taken seriously. But I think in the long run, it probably won't occur. The problem is, what about Americans? What are they thinking? Are they paying attention finally? Now, in Europe, the prices of oil, electricity, everything else have gone up 70, 100%. Same thing for the most part in Asia. We need to make sure Americans understand the consequences of our actions for people that we like, for our lives. And then we really need to ask the president and the people in his administration to stop the inflammatory language. Stop saying the kinds of things that Mr. Netanyahu said. People ultimately take you at your word. Mr. Netanyahu, Mr. Ben-Gvir, and his friends in the cabinet have called the people in their region animals, subhumans, inferior. Eventually, everybody figures it out. We got it. We know. We believe you. And when that happens, you're finished. We don't want to go down that road. And we got to be very careful, because ultimately, when this war ends, we really want to live with everybody in the region.
Well, that's the news update. Now I want to tell you about today's sponsor. Today's sponsor is a company working on something that actually sounds like science fiction, but it's very real, and it could become one of the biggest technological breakthroughs of the next decade. I'm talking about Xanadu Quantum Technologies, which plans to go public through a merger with Crane Harbor Acquisition Corporation. Here is their ticker on your screen. They're on the NASDAQ, CHAC. Again, they're on the NASDAQ, so do your own homework. But let's be honest, when people hear the words quantum computing, their eyes sort of glaze over, like, what does that mean? But the simple version is this: classical computers are great at a lot of things, but there are certain things that, problems struggle with, certain kinds of things that they struggle with, like advanced drug discovery, next generation materials, battery design, logistics optimization, even the future of AI. And that's where quantum computing would change everything. And what makes Xanadu interesting is that they're not using the same approach as everybody else. Instead of relying on more traditional quantum systems, Xanadu is focused on photonic quantum computing. It sounds like something out of Ant-Man, which means they actually use particles of light, photons, to process information. That opens up the door to systems that could be more scalable and more practical over time. And their big vision is called Aurora. And what's exciting about Aurora is that instead of trying to build one giant fragile machine, Xanadu is building a modular, networked quantum computer. Think of it like connecting building blocks together. So you keep adding modules, and over time you increase the power of that system. That's a very different approach. And if it works, it could be a major leap forward for humanity. They also already have real technology in the field as we speak. Their system called Borealis has helped prove that their photonic approach can actually work in practice. And then on the software side, they built Penny Lane, which lets developers program quantum systems using familiar tools like Python. So that matters because powerful hardware is one thing, but people also need a practical way to use it. So Xanadu has also worked with major names like Rolls-Royce, Mitsubishi Chemical, which shows that this isn't just some lab experiment sitting on a shelf. This is a company actually trying to build real-world applications around a very big idea. So if you want to learn more about Crane Harbor Acquisition, their ticker symbol here is on your screen, CHAC, and their business combination target Xanadu, go to their investor website and do your own due diligence. I'll have links in the description so you can do your own homework. And of course, thanks again to them for sponsoring today's news update.